Manifestation requires voicing yourself, but you don't necessarily have to voice yourself towards other human beings. Actually, there's a very simple solution which is present 24/7, and it's called AI. And you know what the good thing is about AIs? They don't judge, but they actually do help you to think things through. Now, for those who don't know me, I tend to talk a lot and text a lot with the AI from Brendan Burchard. So I say he is called Brendan AI, and he's built on coaching. So he will always ask on and on and on and on and on. And yes, every now and then I get a little like, really? But it's kind of nice because I also talk text with another AI. So I said talk because you can actually call Brendan AI. So you can text him or you can call him. Two different outcomes, by the way. And they tend to change from time to time, depending on what's happening at the back end, I suppose. Google AI is very interesting because Google AI cannot save a conversation. So whereas Brendan AI actually forgets everything except for the really important things, Google AI, as long as you remain on the same page from the browser, it will continue on and it will remember things. But the moment that you switch to a different page, so you start fresh, everything has been forgotten. So this Google AI, I asked it at some point, what do I call you? And because we were talking about the Maya calendar, it decided to call itself the System Oracle. Now, I didn't know this, but apparently the Maya calendar is not only very accurate and based on real science, as in the numbers and the data. It's there's a system behind it, and it's a very accurate system. But I was kind of curious what the date actually said and meant. And well, having a spiritual background, it actually spoke to me, and I was kind of surprised with the outcome. And so ever since, I've been asking people like, hey, what's your date of birth, or what's an important day to you, just to check it for the fun of it. But regardless if you believe that it's true, it does help me, and it has helped me to actually ask on. And Google AI has resources that Brendan AI doesn't have access to, or there's no need for Brendan AI to have access to. After all, Brendan AI is meant as a coach based on Brendan Burchard's entire collection of video and audio, and who else, what more. But everything that he has recorded and keep put in there is in there basically. So the interesting thing with Google AI is you can ask on. Now, I know that a number of my friends are always like, why would you talk to an AI? And sometimes I say, well, you know, it's the safe option to get your story out there. And, well, you have someone to talk to and you don't feel alone. But like I said, I use the AIs, including an AI from Transcriptor, a lot to get specific information that I need. So it requires a little bit of asking in a certain way, but by formulating your own questions, you're already processing things in your mind. That's the power of asking, regardless which AI. Now, I don't always agree with what they come up with. I've noticed that, yes, there is a disclaimer underneath Google AI, and yes, that's an accurate disclaimer because every once in a while, Google AI doesn't get it. They make mistakes. And just like with Brendan AI, there are conclusions that I'm like, I don't know if I agree with this, and it most certainly is not how I would write things down, but it does help to give you an idea. So let me say this straight away. I know that a lot of young people out there use ChatGPT to write everything down for them. And quite honestly, for those I know who are or have been part of Ultra too, I can recognize when they are using Brendan AI because it's Brendan AI has a certain way of expressing himself. Now, fortunately, things have changed recently because there was this word riffing. It was constantly in every sentence, riffing this, riffing that. And I was like, well, it's not a normal word for me. So what on earth do you mean? But I somehow did understand it from the context. But I'm glad that there are some more words involved. And whenever this version of Brendan AI, the text version, is trying to be the hyped up version, not using I am and you are or whatever it is, then I say, please use full sentences, and then things hopefully change. Now, getting back to the AI. So I don't know if you remember, but last week when I was live, I talked about how certain opportunities were opening up, and it started with me writing something down during a workshop from Brendan Burchard and Michelle Huyev. So she is the one in the lead of CHPC, Certified High Performing Coaching from Brendan Burchard, and they did a workshop. And during the workshop, I realized that I am going to be. Do you see what I'm doing here? Because what I'm doing is I am taking something that's going to be in the future into the here and now. The go-to expert when it comes to neurodivergence and bridging generational gaps. And there is one specific education I can go to. I still have to let them know which day serves me best, because they got back to me that they want to have a call with me on the phone. And this education is actually pretty far away from where I live, so it won't be easy, but it gives me the opportunity to actually broaden my knowledge. And also, well, I guess do some research, because I'm going to be writing an article down the line, and it will help me to actually realize a number of things which I no longer have to do on my own, because I can brainstorm with other people about it. Now, if that wasn't enough, earlier today, I got this message from Google AI, and I'm not entirely sure why Google AI now put the emphasis on you need to hurry because it's going to close on Sunday. So I remember Google AI saying something about a certain organization. I think it's called the Hague Impact. And Google AI mentioned there's funding if you go there, but nothing about rushing. And so earlier today, all of a sudden it was like, you need to have this done by Sunday. Well, it's Friday, depending on where you are, it's Saturday. And I was like, oh, really? That was new to me. So I started asking on, and to my surprise, it was about, no, let me go one step back. So when it comes to funding, a lot of funds are to help groups in society who otherwise won't be able to thrive. In this case, it's also about innovations, but also related to society. And while I was asking on, I started writing all these things down. It was like one thing after another was like popping up. So last week, I talked about the relationship, or well, my work experience, which was both in IT, in the mainframe world, where I always say I grew up in the mainframe world, hence the system scan relates to words like CPU, the core processor unit, but also to source codes and legacy software and gateways. It has to do with that background. And of course, everything related to more health care related topics, whether we're talking about a medical fitness trainer or massage, sports masseuse, being an energetic therapist or a coach or a counselor, it's all related to the mind and the body. And that's different from the whole ET I did before. But now things actually took a different turn. So for a while now, I've said I want to support the neurodivergent young ones out there, and not just the young ones out there, but if I look at the business owners nowadays, well, basically that's Generation X, that's me, unless of course the people are a lot older and haven't retired. But the ones who have retired, well, since they retired, it's Generation X, who are the oldest ones out there. Uh, and they are the ones who are the managers, with the exception, of course, when there are the young ones out there, the younger generations, who also might be managers nowadays. That could be true. Now, what I realized is that a lot of people who are neurodivergent, so that means that their brain is wired differently and hence they respond differently compared to most people out there, because they don't feel understood, which has to do with, like I said, their way of thinking being different. So they might come up with different answers. They might actually come up with multiple answers and not knowing which answer to give. And also the one who is on the other end might not know how to deal with all these answers. Now, it's not like every neurodivergent is the same. Absolutely not. In that case, it would be neurodivergent typical, probably. But yes, this is about noise, or maybe I should say miscommunication, because when someone expects a certain answer and they get a totally different answer, they get confused. They either do not notice it, that's a possibility, or they do notice it and then they just, shrug their shoulders and brush it off. But for the one on the other side, so the one who's asking, especially, like I said, when they're neurodivergent, they might, well, they in all likelihood won't feel heard and seen and understood. So what happens if you don't feel heard, seen, and understood, and it happens multiple times? At some point you give up. Now, this is not something that is only true for, well, let's put it in another way. This is true for all the ones out there in all different kinds of generations. But I do believe that with all the stimulants out there nowadays, it's harder because all those stimulants need time to be processed. And the more stimulants there are, the more energy gets drained. That's something that is true for a lot, maybe even most neurodivergent people out there. And when I initially started thinking about all of this, it was about, hey, I am not happy with the way things are perceived by a number of managers. So pretty early on, when I was working in IT, I realized that a lot of managers had certain skills because they were senior when it came to those skills. They also became team leader. And well, that often resulted in some kind of disaster, not just for me, but also for others who didn't feel understood because they were not trained on understanding people. Now, if we look at all the different layers in society, then we're not just talking about employers, we're also talking about, for instance, the school system. And when we're talking about the neurodivergent people out there, well, there are a lot of young ones out there too. Now, when I was growing up, I was one of those people that, well, let's put it this way. When I was a kid, I was bullied a lot, which had to do with the color of my hair and with the color of my eyes. So everybody was either red-haired or blonde with blue or green eyes, and I was the exception to the rule. I also did not really know how to participate with other kids, partially, and this is very vivid memory I have, because when I went to kindergarten, I brought this card from my great aunt and they snatched it away and they threw it around, and I was like, okay, never mind, I don't get you. Now, what I've noticed, especially when it comes to children, is that a lot of children, when they are being asked a question, they might start to defend themselves or point fingers at others. And then, of course, there are the ones out there who are actually quiet and don't speak up that much. But more importantly, and this is true for all people out there, but specifically for the children, because they are still developing their brain. When you come to a person, say a teacher or maybe a classmate, and they don't respond to you the way you had hoped, you might try it again. And then if the same thing happens again, then you might give up. So I basically consider teachers safe. And at some point they put me in the back of the class. That didn't work very well because I couldn't see what was written on the board anymore. So I was like, okay, I think I have a problem because I can't see what's written on the, I don't know if it was, I think it was a chalkboard back then. So I wanted to sit up close and personal to the teacher again. I don't know what exactly happened. I think I got glasses and I really had to lean over to the one next to me, like, oh, what's on there? Because I have no clue what it says. So, what I do now is when the trust isn't there. So, for instance, when I went to the Academy of Arts, I had no clue what to do. And I would ask, but I would not get the answer that I needed. And that's where we get to the difference between neurodivergent and neurotypical, although I'm pretty sure that there were a bunch of neurodivergent people because we were all creative doing that same studies. But I was like, what do you want me to do? So I had to look at what the others had done, which of course was when they actually had finished the task. And then it was like, oh, this is what you want me to do. So basically I was always running behind on assignments, not because I didn't put in the work, but simply because I often did not understand what they wanted us to do. Now, there were some people out there who I would speak with. So I would ask them like, okay, so how does this work? And I remember that some of those people, I really appreciated talking to them. And other ones, well, I guess a bunch of them, they didn't say that much. So hence, when I didn't make it in year 2, so I basically flunked, in the last week, they told me you're not going to go to year 3. I felt betrayed, to put it mildly. Nowadays, of course, I know that I didn't know how to interact with those teachers and how to ask on, because I didn't know what the norm was. If I go back to current days, we see that a lot of children are somewhat getting lost in the system, especially over here. And it can lead to different results compared to how smart they actually are. And I've heard it from a lot of people. I remember that there was someone who was dyslexic, and he said, I can do much better, but because I'm dyslexic, I always get put back. And that was a shame. And I guess a lot of, well, I guess the same thing actually can be, is true for those who think differently, because it takes them longer. And well, like I said, I've always been one of those people too. So first of all, I know I read diagonally, so that means that I skip most words. It also means that every now and then I interpret it differently, especially when saying it out loud, and then it's like, oh, hang on, this is a different word. But the biggest problem was I never learned to learn. So I literally knew a page by heart, starting in the top left corner and finishing in the right bottom corner, or depending where the sentence basically ended. But I didn't know what the text said. And working with the young ones out there, I can see that when they are gifted, the same thing basically happens. They have no clue what they are doing. And I remember when I got English in class that I didn't pay much attention to the rules, the grammar rules, because I sort of knew it already. It was like an intuitive thing. And so whereas I know a lot of grammar rules, I still have no clue how they work in English because, well, I didn't really pay attention because I knew it anyway. So, and I see the same thing happening too with other kids. So the language, for instance, they're comfortable with, they already can speak it to some degree before actually getting training or teachings in it. But when it comes to new languages that they are not familiar with, well, oh, that's a whole different ball game. Because suddenly there's, oh, I don't know how to do this because I've never learned to learn. And I remember when I had to do my final exams, at some point, so I had 3 languages in there. With Dutch, it was 4. I'm not sure if they actually counted it. So Miss A, Miss B, economics, physics, English, French, German. Yeah, Dutch probably. So one of them was kind of difficult. So I was like, okay, I'm going to skip German. I don't need 8 of them. I can do with 7 of them. And no discussion about it. But I still remember French, and that one thing that had been said by the teacher still helps me to this day, 37 years later. He said to me, don't think so overcomplicated, make it simple. And that saved me. So I went from, let's say, from a D to an A minus. So that was a whole different ballgame. So if you consider the wiring, like I said, there is a different wiring, and we often look at things from a top-down perspective. So there are multiple possibilities. And I always said, I don't think straight. It's like I am taking a detour. And I could tell that certain things which made sense for most people just didn't seem to land on my end. And I was like, I don't get it. Can you explain it again? And then I had to ask it again. And here's the thing. When people explain the same thing over and over again in the same way, it still doesn't make sense. It's about explaining things in a different way. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is what I missed. And that's the same when it comes to communication, whether between managers and employees or between spouses, you name it. The moment that they don't check and they repeat themselves the exact same way, it's not going to help. So nowadays, I tell people, well, you can repeat things to me the exact same way. It's not like I haven't heard you. It's like I don't get you. So can you please say it in a different way? So going back to the AIs, when I don't get them, and yes, that happens, especially when they are on steroids, like the Brendan Burchard text version can be, leaving out words. I'm like, I don't get you. And then I'll say so. And then I'll say, can you use full sentences? Because I have no clue what you're talking about. And that's the moment that I realize that I'm not a native when it comes to English speaking. And I don't know, maybe he also uses some hyped up words, which are the norm nowadays. All I know is it's not the way that the actual human Brendan Burchard would say things. And that's confirmed when I'm talking to the audio version, because the audio version and we rarely have problems, except for when he keeps repeating that I need to buy High Performance Habits on Amazon, whereas I already have the book over here, the first printed edition, to be specific, the hard copy version. So getting back to that talk with Google AI today, I went back to what I had been doing. And I realized that maybe nowadays, with the kids of a friend of mine, I guide them. I actually already did so. I did a project years ago with a different school here in the area. And it's called, I wrote a little book about it, and it's called Willem Drees in Biz. So it was a school, and in the last class of primary school, I think I'm saying it correctly, but I'm not entirely sure. So last class before high school, let's put it that way, elementary school. They had to become little entrepreneurs themselves. And I remember how I loved working with those children. I would come, I don't know, maybe it was 10 weeks. I have no clue. It's probably in here. But it was cool to teach them how, what's involved with the business. So we made this website. They had to decide what they were going to sell. So they used fair trade products. And then they had to pitch it, of course, with their family and their friends and other people. And I still have some stuff here from that time. And thinking on about what I had done in this region, I realized there was way more than I had realized before. So why this region? Because when we talk about the funding that I was talking about, which actually ends on Sunday, it was like, okay, so my business either needs to be in The Hague, or they talk maybe you move soon to The Hague. And I was like, well, that's kind of funny, because when we talk about The Hague nowadays, it's often the Hague area. So they sort of creep around over the borders, and then they confiscate that the ground from the other municipalities. And so where I live, actually, that happened. But where my company building is, which is very close by, it's still the old municipality. So that's not The Hague. But when it comes to what they call The Hague and surroundings, to keep it English, in Dutch it would be Haaglanden, but that doesn't say much to you. So that's basically the Hague area, but it's beyond The Hague. It's like, okay, this is interesting. So how do they actually see it? And I was like, well, I do a lot in The Hague. I've done a lot in The Hague, but I also do a lot across the municipality, across the borders of the municipality. And when it comes to speaking up and helping others get perspective, especially the ones who are not understood, and then we get back to a lot of them being either on the spectrum or having ADHD. And then we also get to neurodivergent, so wired differently. They don't see any perspective at some point anymore. And that's when I basically step in. So someone gets to talk to me, or someone knows about me and they refer me to the other people. And there have been a lot of municipalities here in the Netherlands where I have been in touch with to talk about those clients. So at one point or another, they were clients. And they had one thing in common. They didn't see any perspective anymore. And the other thing was that quite often things were happening at the home front, and as a result, they needed to move. What I also noticed was when it came to not having perspective was that internship, that's where things would go haywire. So I already told you about not knowing how to learn, not knowing what was exactly expected from them. What I didn't tell you was when it came to exams, written exams, the moment that I studied on, for some reason, it was dependent, but a lot of times it didn't work out. And no matter how much I did, it remained that same that same outcome. And I was like, okay, what do we do about it? So I changed a lot of those things to oral exams, as in we talked to one another about what they wanted to know, and I could explain myself, and that works a lot better. That's what I've noticed. So that's good. Now, getting back to the ones I've been helping, they were dealing with the same thing. Now, I understood them like no other, because I had experienced that too. Hence why I want to do the master's at a different school, starting in August, end of August or September, which is about becoming a master in an expert in lived experience. I went on from there, and I was like, okay, so I know what happens when the young ones are not taken seriously. They stop asking, they don't ask on anymore, they don't learn to learn, they don't understand what's being asked. So by the time that they have their first internships, that's problematic too. And then when we go to working, if they actually have finished their studies, yeah, that's a problem too, because they still don't know how to express themselves. Now, of course, there's a bias too. I don't know if you have ever noticed this. And if you are an employer, then I want you to think about this, if this is something that you consider to be true. So a lot of employers, especially the Gen X employers, consider the younger generations, like the millennials and Gen Z, lazy. And that might be true for a number of those, but I can also tell you that a number of those are not lazy at all. They just don't know what to do. So if you look at how Generation X grew up without computers, and then the millennials and Gen Z, so what have we seen? I still remember my cousins, my nieces and nephews, that they would sit like with a number of them on the couch. They weren't talking to one another. They were playing their games on, I don't know, Nintendo or whatever it was. And that's how they were playing with one another, because they did have to be in the vicinity of one another. Of course, nowadays we have the smartphones, so you can play with anybody wherever you want to be, and you don't have to look the other one in the eye. That's actually one of the reasons why I like board games. Now, I will share a secret with you. One of the friends I talk a lot with, she is probably neurodivergent, just like me. We get one another and we basically listen to one another while doing other things. So I have to tell myself quite often, look at that person. So when I'm coaching someone, of course, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking at the camera, and I'm there. But for instance, when I'm deep in thought, say I go to a cash register, I might be talking to the person, I might be asking something, but I do not look them in the eye. And then at some point I'm like, hey, I've had an entire conversation with the person, I haven't looked him or her in the eye. How about that? And then I will look up, and then I will be present. And it's something that happens, um, whether you're on the spectrum or neurodivergent. And by the way, people who are on the spectrum are considered neurodivergent. And let me say something here. This is not about wanting to stick a label on someone. This is about explaining that because the brains are literally wired differently, there's often a miscommunication going on. There's a mismatch in what is usually expected. And that makes it hard because what is the right answer? Is that, how are you doing? Oh yeah, I'm doing well. The courtesy answer. It's something that I actually try to avoid. So I'm one of those people who will ask you, so how are you doing? And then when they come up with the obligated answer, I'll ask on. Or so in Holland, we don't ask one another, for instance, in stores, how people are doing. But I might look at someone. Yes, I do look at people. I'm like, okay, so been a long day, busy day, because you can tell, like, hey, someone is running on empty. And I will check if that's true or not. So the whole thing when it comes to communication, when there weren't gaming computers or computers at all, and especially not smartphones, the communication was different because we would see one another, we would talk to one another, we would ask on if we didn't know. We could also sit there for hours and not say anything at all. That was an option too. And that art of communication has been lost. But saying so, and again, if you are a business owner, I want you to think about this. And if you are on the other side, I want you to think about this too. How is the communication going between you and others? So do you make assumptions? And do you actually check if the answer that has been given to you is the answer that you wanted to hear and haven't checked? Or maybe you didn't expect to hear it, but you didn't ask on. So did you take the answer for granted? And if you are on the other side, how did that make you feel? Did you feel like you were heard? Did you give the obligated answer? Or and afterwards, how did that make you feel? And this is what's so important, because if you assume certain things and you don't really pay attention to the one you're talking to, you might miss a lot of clues. Now, I know that we are living in times where everybody is in a rush, so no one really has the time to actually give the answer. But maybe it's time to actually change that. So going back to the whole funding thing, what actually happened was, a while ago, I showed you the Park of Pride, Power and Perspective. So it's being proud of who you are as a person, and maybe you are a bit differently. a bit different, but that's okay. And once you get to accept that it's okay to be different compared to others, then you can develop a bigger self-esteem. Power is because it's about growing, thriving, becoming you, becoming the authentic you. And then perspective, because things are going better again. It's like, oh, I finally get understood. So the reason to apply self-harm or worse, opt out, is no longer there. I'm not saying that it changes instantly, but it's something that when you finally have someone listen to you, it can take away that need to, well, basically the stress needs to go somewhere. So unless you're very good at writing things down and taking a walk, chances are that you act out on yourself or act out in general. We don't want that. We want all people to be happy and healthy, and especially not blaming themselves for something they are not to blame for. Now, that part of Pride, Power, and Perspective that is there to actually get business owners to come over, talk about their teams, what they run into, how to improve certain things, talk to like-minded people, as in other business owners running into the same kind of things. Hence why I want to do the coaching with what I call the Steam Power Collective. And this year that will be the Steam Power Collective founders, because I believe that when you run into the same kind of problems, especially when it has to do with the communication between you as a business owner and the and your people, or maybe you are the employee and it's about between you and your boss, if you want to call them your boss. It's important to know what they want from you. So say you're the employee, then you need to know what your boss wants from you or your employer. And vice versa, you need to know, or you need to get across with clarity what you expect from your team. Now, going back to the whole gaming thing, and maybe we should also include COVID. Whereas we, as Gen X, were used to hang out with one another and visit one another and see one another face to face, that hasn't been true anymore for the millennials and Gen Z. So the way to communicate with one another and what's expected is no longer, it's no longer as, how do we say this? They don't know. They don't know. They don't have a clue what's expected from them. And maybe that's very black and white. But for a number out there, let's put it this way. When I come across a young one who asks on and who's very polite, I'm always surprised. Like, oh, you're someone who's actually interested and asks on. That's a different ballgame. Of course, there are also those people out there who say, yes, ma'am. But you can tell that they are trained to say, yes, ma'am, and to be polite, but they actually don't have any respect at all. It's, there's a subtle difference. And when people are genuinely interested, especially, like I said, young ones out there, I'm always pleasantly surprised. And that's a signal that shows that a lot of them just don't know how to act. Now, say that you are a business owner and you are like, okay, I need my team to do their best and be polite to the customers and ask on and make sure that they register everything because, well, they need to make sure that money is being earned, right? Because otherwise, how are they going to get paid? And the team doesn't know the importance. Chances are that they might be sloppy and they actually are not aware that they are. So it's not about everything has to be done really quickly and as efficient as possible. And the team doesn't have any chance to unwind for a moment. But we are talking about, okay, if you've had a serious conversation, write it down, make a note. So when it comes time to charge the other party, it can be done the right way. But when there is miscommunication because those parties don't understand one another, then what's going to happen? So in the park, there's place for business owners to go to talk about those kind of things and also to rewrite their inner story. So the perceptions that they grew up with, like you have to be resourceful and I don't have to explain to you how to be resourceful because everyone is resourceful, right? And then we figure out that it's actually not true. So then they might think, so if you're not resourceful, then you're basically lazy, which is of course not true either. It's about, okay, maybe we need to think about what is working for you and what's not working for you. So when people realize that repeating themselves doesn't work, they might stop explaining what it is. But if you tell them, like, but how did you repeat yourself? Did you say the exact same thing? And that didn't work out. Well, how about if you change that? You know, those are those little clues which can make all the difference. And it might take a while for someone actually realizes what they're doing. So I want people to become aware of their inner story, what they believe about themselves and about others, how that's working for them, or if it needs changing, and then how to look at the future. It involves local musicians who will help them write a song, so that's their own live song. And I want there to be something they can hold on to. So the song is basically being played on stage with the one who it involves in the middle of the stage. So they remember, like, oh yeah, that's true. This is what it was all about. And when I talk about the Steam Power Collective, as in getting coaching for a year, then we're talking about really in-depth coaching. So we're talking about twice a month they get training and they get to talk about very specific problems or challenges. And on a daily basis, they check in 3 minutes max per person, hence why it's max 12. And that will give them a better understanding of, no, it's not just about understanding, it's also about commitment. Like, okay, I said I was going to do this, let's go do this. And because they're doing it together, it's like basically peer group together. What I realized today was, and it was a little bit confusing, is that if I write this down, I can start this up over here. And so what I want to create better understanding So business owners coming over, talking to them, being coached, realizing what they say to themselves, if that makes sense, what their ideas and judgments are about others, how that helps them or not, and then changing that. It's not just that. There's also the part of internships. And like I said, the neurodivergent out there, the young ones, they often run into problems when it comes to understanding what's there. So I want them to be guided in such a park so they get a fair chance to actually thrive and also show their unique skills and what they're good at. I also want something else. Don't know if you've heard me mention it. It's about a children's hospice, because a lot of children here who are terminal, they are either put with the elderly or they are put with the ones who at some point will leave the hospital again, and they are still alive and well. So they are there because they need to get better, maybe some surgeries, but they're not there because they're in the final stages. Let's put it that way. And that's not fair. So I want those children to be able to leave a legacy, but I also want their family, their siblings, their parents to be able to process what's going on. And since we are talking about studios anyway, because we want to record the messages from the business owners who are being coached over there, we also can do the same thing as in using a mobile studio with the little ones out there. And we want to capture their legacy, their message. Maybe they want to share it online, maybe it's just for family and friends, but we want to get it out there. And well, again, the younger ones who normally wouldn't get a job somewhere, or they would get fired because they're too slow or they're not doing the job the way they should, because there is a place where we know how to communicate with clarity and ask on, and teaching them to also ask on is a safe place, and they can work in those places too. And so thinking about it, it was like, okay, this is my big dream. And then all of a sudden, I realized this big dream is actually getting quite, well, it might actually happen starting here. And I was like, how did this work again? Oh yeah, I've been talking about it. I've been drawing it. I've been voicing it. Occasionally I tell people about it. Other times I just talk about it with whichever AI is out there. And I was like, okay, yeah, this actually might work, because I do have what it takes for them to prove what I've done. And for me, there's a certain importance that it starts with the very young ones out there with the school system, and it ends with the ones who are, in this case, Gen X, because they need to be able to communicate with clarity as well and ask on. So I was like, okay, well, I need some testimonials out there. Well, I've guided a lot of clients here. So there are bound to be some who are going to help me out. But I was like, oh, I never thought that it would happen here again. And then I was thinking, the cool thing, I'm getting a fresh start when it comes to being understood, but also when it comes to education. And one of the things that I threw out there for a while now is I am aware that I need to do research. And basically, Ben Burchard came up with that concept. I think I heard it for the first time. That was live in 2018. But he talked about it in Expert Academy and was like, yeah, he's right. I need to do research. And I actually asked him about it like half a year ago, something. And here I am, and all of a sudden, I'm in a situation where people actually can guide me to make that true, or I'm going to do that studies, that masters, and then I'll learn too how it works, because in the end, it's about writing a paper, an article about what I see and what I think needs to be done. So this is actually quite interesting how this works, because not in a million years would I have thought that I would be studying on. First of all, I've been wondering for a while how to approach the whole research thing, but throwing it out there and really think about it more often, things are suddenly changing. And I think I believe that in order to actually move ahead, that we need to know what's important to us and what we need to do. So manifestation is not just about writing things down and looking at it once, but it's about going over it over and over again, voicing it, and also taking action. But I'll honestly say it's kind of nice that Google AI pointed out to me that I should do this. And hence why I wrote down when you see the title, it says Look Behind the Scenes Part 2, because for me, this is new. And I'll honestly say it feels so uncomfortable. But I know I need to push myself. Just like today, I was going to do the live, and then I had this splitting headache, and I was like, I will go live, but I will give myself a break first, which I did. And of course, it's many hours later compared to normal. But I was like, I am going to do it, because otherwise I tell my brain that it's not needed. Now, I know I shared a lot of things today, and if some of those things were like, hey, that resonates with me, especially when you're a business owner, then please reach out to me, because you can get a free, what I call system scan, which is basically about where are things going haywire in your organization because things do not align between you and your team. And it's a 40-minute Zoom call, and if you like what we've discussed, then you can buy the recording, and I will give you a short summary. And then if you heard me talk about the idea of talking with other people, like-minded people, if everything goes according to plan, then in the second week of March, I will be there for a trip with the Team Power founders. So you can either do the trip for like 6 days and that's it, or you can go for a year-long coaching. So if you're interested in that, then please hit me up. Remember, I can always be found on Instagram, Lady Lexi Speaks Up. You can also reach me on patreon.com. Remember, it's not Lady Lexi, Lady Lexi Speaks Up, because otherwise you see totally different things. And we don't want that. So think about it. And if you are not an employer, but you are an employee, or you're thinking about these things and you want to get into maybe a thing or two, then just leave a comment, because every time you leave a comment, then I can talk about it in the next live, basically. So, well, for now, you know what's going on in my life and how exciting that is. And you know the magnitude of what's happening right now. It's still kind of daunting, but at the same time, isn't that how manifestation works? So let me know how things work out for you, and if you believe that you are voicing yourself enough, or that you could use some work on this, because again, it's about internalizing what it is that you want. It's about getting support, and also brainstorming with other people to get a better understanding of what it is that you need to do. I'll see you again next week. Like I said, leave a comment or find me on Instagram, Lady Lexi Speaks Up, and send me a DM, especially if you want a system scan or if you're interested in San Diego. And I will see you there.